You know what? I'm 80 years old. I've seen presidents come and go. I've watched this country through World War II, Vietnam, Watergate, 9/11, financial crashes. I thought I'd seen everything America could throw at itself. I was wrong. What happened in those final months of Trump's presidency changed something fundamental in how I see this country. After 80 years on this planet, it takes a lot to shake me. But what I witnessed, what I heard from people I've known for decades, it shook me to my core. I grew up in New York in the 1940s. My neighborhood in Little Italy was full of real characters. Guys who'd fought in the war, women who'd held families together, immigrants who'd risked everything to get here. They argued about everything, but they all believed in America. They believed in something bigger than themselves. There was this guy, Tony, who ran the corner grocery store. Lost his leg in Normandy, never complained, never asked for pity, just did his job, served his community, raised his kids to be good Americans. When politicians came around election time, Tony would listen to all of them, Democrats and Republicans, then make up his own mind based on who he thought would do right by the country. That's how it worked then. People disagreed, sure, but they respected each other's right to disagree. They understood that democracy meant living with people you didn't always like or agree with. My father was an artist. My mother worked whatever jobs she could find. We weren't rich, but we had dignity. We had hope. We believed if you worked hard and played by the rules, this country would give you a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. That's the America I grew up believing in. That's the America I've spent my career trying to understand through the characters I've played. Men facing impossible choices, ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. But what I've been watching during Trump's presidency, it's like watching that America slowly suffocate. And half the country seems perfectly fine with it. I remember the exact moment it hit me, January 4th, 2021, at a gathering in Manhattan. Just some old friends from the business, writers, directors, people who've been around long enough to see through the garbage. We were talking about the election, and this guy I've known for 20 years says, "Bob, you have to admit, at least Trump fights for us." I nearly choked. Fights for us? What are you talking about? He's not part of the system. He tells it like it is. I stared at this intelligent, successful person, and I realized he actually believed it. He thought a man who'd spent his entire life cheating contractors, avoiding taxes, lying about everything from his wealth to his weight, was somehow fighting for working people. I stared at this guy, this intelligent, successful person, and I realized he actually believed what he was saying. He actually thought that a man who'd spent his entire life cheating contractors, avoiding taxes, lying about everything from his wealth to his weight, who'd turned the presidency into his personal reality show, was somehow fighting for working people. That's when it hit me. We weren't just dealing with political differences anymore. We were dealing with two completely different realities. And one of those realities was built entirely on lies. See, I've played liars before. I've studied them, tried to understand how their minds work. In the movies, liars usually have a reason for lying. They're protecting someone, or they're in danger, or they're trying to get out of some mess they've created. But Trump, he lies the way other people breathe, automatically, constantly, even when the truth would serve him better. And the more he lied, the more his supporters loved him for it. They weren't just accepting the lies, they were celebrating them. They were making the lies part of their identity. That's when I knew we were in uncharted territory. I started paying closer attention after that party. I started watching the rallies, reading the social media posts, listening to what people were actually saying. And what I found scared the hell out of me. These weren't just political disagreements anymore. This was a full-scale assault on the concept of truth itself. Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania, came to see me in February 2021. We'd met through mutual friends over the years. Good guy, principled. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in the past few months. "Bob, what's happening in my party isn't politics anymore. It's something dangerous." He told me about the pressure he was getting from leadership, about colleagues genuinely frightened of their own voters, terrified of being seen as disloyal to Trump even when they knew he was wrong. Chris Smith, another Republican, told me something similar at a charity event. The party I've served for decades, I don't recognize it anymore. We used to argue about policy. Now we're arguing about whether democracy itself is worth preserving. These conversations stuck with me because these are serious people, experienced legislators who've seen political cycles come and go. If they were worried, really worried, then maybe I wasn't overreacting. These conversations stuck with me because these are serious people, experienced legislators who've seen political cycles come and go. If they were worried, really worried, then maybe I wasn't overreacting to what I was seeing. Then came January 6th. I watched it live like millions of other Americans. I watched American citizens attack the Capitol, chanting for the execution of the vice president, hunting for Congress members with zip ties and weapons. And I watched Trump sit in the White House for hours, watching it unfold, doing nothing to stop it. That's when I understood the word treason, watching American citizens attack the American government at the direction of the American president. But here's what really shook me. The next day, instead of universal condemnation, I watched Republican leaders downplay what happened, make excuses, blame everyone except the man who orchestrated it. Jeff Van Drew defended the mob. Tom Kean Jr. called them patriots. Patriots, people who attacked police officers, who tried to overthrow a legitimate election. That's when I knew we'd crossed a line we might never be able to uncross. When violence in service of lies becomes patriotism, you don't have a political disagreement anymore. You have a crisis of civilization. I started thinking about characters I've played. Travis Bickle watching society decay. Jake LaMotta destroying everything through rage. Vito Corleone watching his vision get corrupted. They all started with legitimate grievances but turned to destruction instead of solutions. What haunts me is how similar the pattern is. These characters, they start by convincing themselves they're the good guys. They tell themselves that the system is so corrupt, so rigged against them, that extreme measures are justified. They surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear, and slowly, methodically, they destroy everything they claim to love. That's what I see happening in America. Millions with real concerns about their futures, but instead of constructive action, they're being told democracy itself is the enemy. They're being told that elections don't matter unless their side wins, that violence might be necessary to save the country. And the man leading this movement, the man they've chosen as their champion, is someone who's never sacrificed anything for anyone, someone who's never served his country in any capacity except to enrich himself. Someone who turned the presidency into a money-making operation and the American people into marks in his latest con. The men who came back from World War II had seen real fascism. They'd fought it, bled for it. If you'd told them American citizens would storm their own capital carrying Confederate and Nazi symbols, they'd have called you crazy. But that's exactly what happened. The Republican Party that once stood for law and order, for fiscal responsibility, for American strength and values, has become a personality cult devoted to a man who represents the opposite of everything they once claimed to believe in. And the worst part is, they know it. In private conversations, away from the cameras and the microphones, they admit it. I was at a dinner in L.A. sitting next to a Republican senator. After a few drinks, he said, "You know, Bob, we all know he's crazy. We all know he's dangerous, but he's got such a hold on our voters that we can't say anything. It would be political suicide." Political suicide. That's what telling the truth has become in the Republican Party. The media environment enabling this collapse is unprecedented. Social media algorithms rewarding extreme content. Cable news prioritizing entertainment over information. People can live in separate information universes, fed constant outrage and conspiracy theories. I've watched friends, intelligent people, get sucked into these echo chambers. They start sharing articles from sources I've never heard of, spreading theories that sound like something out of a bad movie script. When you try to show them facts from legitimate sources, they dismiss it as mainstream media lies. It's like watching people voluntarily lobotomize themselves. At the center is Trump, who understands attention is more valuable than truth. He's turned politics into professional wrestling. Fake storylines, but real emotions. His supporters know he's performing, but don't care because he makes them feel powerful, important, part of something bigger than themselves. There are real problems in this country: economic inequality, health care, bankrupting families, failing education, a political system serving wealthy donors over ordinary voters. These create the desperation Trump feeds on. But instead of solving them, he made them worse while putting on a show that confused performance with policy. I've spent my career studying characters like this, men who use charisma and manipulation to get what they want. In movies, there's usually someone who stands up to them. In real life, the people who could have stopped Trump often benefited from the chaos he created. When I look at my grandchildren, I feel something I've never felt in 80 years. I feel like I've failed them, like my generation couldn't pass along the democracy we inherited. We had one job, and somehow we couldn't manage it. They're inheriting a more divided America, where facts don't matter, where elections are only legitimate if your side wins, where peaceful transfer of power can't be taken for granted. That's not the America I grew up believing in. That's not the America that millions around the world still look to as a beacon of hope. I'm 80 years old. I may not see how this story ends, but I pray the final chapter will say we found our way back to the values that made America great. Not the performance of greatness, but the hard work of democracy itself. The work of listening, compromising, putting common good ahead of personal ambition, telling the truth even when inconvenient. That's the America I still believe in. That's the America I hope my grandchildren will inherit. But it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that's what they get.